Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear audience. On behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I welcome all of you to today's webinar titled Ukraine Crisis and Impact on Rohingya Conflict. Before I begin, traditionally we do treaty recognition. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homelands of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Dear audience, today we have invited a guest from Bangladesh, and he has worked extensively in the field of humanitarian works. And we are very keen to learn from him because he is reporting from the ground zero of the conflict. And overall, he's going to share his own perspective of the conflict in the future. Today, we are also very proud to have Dr. Hilal Muhyiddin with us, the co-founder of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada and a professor at North-South University in Bangladesh. The way we plan to organize today's webinar is we're going to invite the guest to speak about 10-12 minutes about his perspective on the conflict, and then we'll engage in a dialogue session. And before I begin, as I promised, let me introduce the guest today. Mr. Delwar H. Khan is a Bangladeshi author and a humanitarian worker. He is an ex-major in the Defense Services Command and Staff College graduate. As a UN peacekeeper, he has participated in several humanitarian interventions in African countries, including South Sudan, Central African Republic, and Mali. He has also worked as an international NGO professional in the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh. Mr. Delwar H. Khan is a social influencer in Bangladesh and a best-selling writer in Bangladesh. He has authored 11 books on history, strategy, self-help, peacekeeping, and refugee crisis. He has got several articles published in international journals on US peacekeeping. His book on Rohingya crisis is a bestseller in Bangladesh, and he is now working on his next book on the same topic. So as you gather, he has extensive experience in publishing his works, and I hope today's discussion would uncover new angles of the conflict and how do you see the future transformation of Rohingya crisis itself. And without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Delwar H. Khan to take the floor. But I just wanted to put out two perspectives before we begin the session today. Rohingya crisis is a signature research effort from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada since its foundation in 2017. And we have published two books so far on the crisis. The recent one is titled Rohingya Crisis and Two-Faced God of Janus, What Lies Ahead. We have successfully organized a book launch ceremony on 30th June, and we invited Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, Honorable Mr. Bob Ray, he was the chief guest. We have heard from Rohingyas and others about the conflict, and this is my last perspective before the guest takes over, is that we all look forward about the conflict resolution as soon as it can be done, because it's not only an enormous load for the host country, Bangladesh, but also it has regional and global ramification of hosting displaced people for a very long time. And this is why, from our side, we have organized this webinar just to listen from Mr. Delwar H. Khan, who has not only written on this crisis, but also worked in that area for a couple of years and looking at various stakeholders and actors in the conflict. So that is all I have. And before I really hand over the floor to Mr. Delwar H. Khan, Mr. Delwar, floor is yours, sir. Go ahead. Delwar, if you can unmute, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thanks are mine. Today, actually, I have a lot to thank. And before I start my Thanksgiving, let me say a warm good morning from this part of the world. Bangladesh is quite warm and humid. And I want to thank Dr. Kausar and Dr. Hilal for inviting me in this webinar on a very contemporary topic on Rohingya refugee crisis. I also want to thank Canadian government because initially, once the crisis was at its peak, at that time, Canadian government took a bold step to shun Aung San Suu Kyi at that time in a pivotal role, and Canada said no to her honorary citizenship in Canada. I also want to thank Canadian government because recently our foreign minister has urged Canada to fund the case going on in ICC, which was actually claimed by Gambia. So a lot to thank, in fact. So with that a small little Thanksgiving, I am also very much grateful to CRRIC for inviting such a humble ground worker, the way Dr. Kausar just said, from ground zero, we are working. Um, and I'm really very hopeful in future, perhaps we'll be able to work together on specifically on this Rohingya crisis, because I'm really inspired by the work already CRRIC is doing on specifically on Rohingya issues. Now, just to clarify my part uh, as a humanitarian aid worker, or you can say emergency responder, uh, apart from the intro given by Dr. Ahmed there, I just want to include that I was a UN peacekeeper, and I had the opportunity to witness at least 8 emergency responses or even peacekeeping missions in the world, which includes crisis in South Sudan, crisis in Mali, crisis in Central African Republic, and crisis in Darfur. So there are a few refugee camps which I came across previously. And in 2017, we saw the exodus going on. The Rohingya people are pouring inside our border. Already, the border we have with Myanmar in that particular area is quite porous. So that is the time actually it was as asking myself why they are coming. Bangladesh is not a first world country. This is a very simple story for me, but it was, I should say, uh, I was discovering in the pages after pages once I was asking these hard questions to myself. In August 2017, the huge Rohingya influx has occurred in Bangladesh. Bangladesh government took the decision to open the border for them, accept them inside. But at that time, as a citizen of Bangladesh, I asked myself why they are coming here. So then I realized for the first time that I personally, like many of our citizens in our country, know very less regarding the Rohingya crisis, their exodus, the genocide occurred in in the Arakan, or now it is Rakhine, and the ethnic cleansing was happening there since 1700th century. So that was the initial understanding I had regarding this Rohingya problem. I used to think that 2017 is the first time they are coming in Bangladesh to take refuge, which was wrong. It has actually started since much before. I will touch upon a bit of history on this. because the overall Rohingya crisis, I wrote a book on this. I I am working there for last 1 year or so on ground, trying to see the crisis practically, moving camp to camp, talking refugee to refugee, and trying to understand that what contribution I can keep in solving this crisis apart from writing a book or having some article published. So then I discovered uh, two things very prominently. Number one is that this is not the first time they are coming here. It was Arakan itself was an independent state. They had their own ruler, they had their own currency, they had their own language. It was only in 17th century the central Burmese government, the King Bodapaya, who occupied this Arakan state. And that is the first time a lot of refugees started taking refuge in Bangladesh because a lot of post-war atrocities and collateral damages made them flee from the combat zone and take refuge in Bangladesh. So after that, suddenly, once the British came in, at that time again, you see history has got a interesting turn. There was a first Anglo-Burmese War, and there was second Anglo-Burmese War. After that, the king of Burma was sent in exile in India, and British took over the Burma. At that time, the people of Arakan, they worked as aid or they helped British government, which continued. During the Second World War, initially the Burmese, they fought for the British troops. But the invincible Japs, the Japanese, they pushed them. And after a certain period of time, the Arakanese Muslim, they who were helping the British troops initially, they become victim of the Japanese force and also the local Burmese. In 1948, the country got independent, but declined to join Commonwealth. Very interestingly. And here also, the British, they had a list of ethnicity of 139 ethnic group in Myanmar, where maybe they claim that it is by mistake. They forgot to include the name of Rohingyas, whom they promised that there will be a separate independent land or independent country named as Arakan. Absolutely forgotten. History has forgotten them. So they took the chance. Once President Ney took over, at that time, gradually in 1982, the big shock came. They just declined that there will not be given any citizenship to the Rohingyas. And it became horrible for them. Horrible for them because they were allowed only to take 2 child. They have to give written that they will not take more than 2 child. They need movement pass to go from one village to another village. Small little concentration camp concept started there. And the ethnic cleansing, right, the great Holocaust started to reveal. As a military historian, I find affinity between the blueprint of great Holocaust designed by the Nazi Germany and the design now they are following. There are repeated operations, Operation Dragon King, or there are at least 4 to 5 operations happened there, and every operation followed single pattern. 3 stages of the operation. First stage, create terror by killing and mass burning and all other things. Number 2, ensure that they are fleeing from the land. And number 3, ensure that they are not able to come back. So this is the design they are following there. And once I went there in the Cox's Bazar camp, I asked, since when this camp is here? And I found the reality is that this Kutupalong camp was established in 1991, not in 2017. So this taking refuge or internal displacement is happening in this border since long. So then I asked again, then why they are coming here? We are not a rich country. We are not a country who can actually afford them to assure a good life. But I found the reality is that they are not only coming in Bangladesh. They are trying to flee through the sea routes to Malaysia or any other places in the world because they need to save their life. Now, I question what is the extent of torture may happen that people with all their belongings, families, and everything, they want to flee away from their own motherland, from where they were staying for centuries. And then the devastating pages of modern genocide and ethnic cleansing was clear. Alone in 2017, the military has killed 24,000 Rohingyas, brutally killed them. Not all of them were shot dead, they were slaughtered. There are satellite images of burnt villages after villages. There was a girl who was raped by 10 Tatmadaw soldiers. Horrific. These stories are uh, unbelievable in this century and happening just other side of our border. That has actually moved me. And I found that historically this cleansing is happening there. Of course, we are neighbor. We had a very good relation with Arakan. The Arakanese literature is enriched by our Bengali culture. The Prince of Bengal, Shah Shuja, he took refuge in Arakan for some period of time. Still, the road is there. We had political and commercial and trade relation with them since long. But all on a sudden, we found that this Rohingya community is not expected in mainland Burma. So now we are actually compelled to accept them in our territory as refugees. So this has moved me and motivated me. I consider this as a crisis of my lifetime. I have not seen First World War. I have not seen the Second World War. So I cannot claim that I am a veteran of those wars. I cannot say my grandchild that I did something for those great wars. But at least I can say that, okay, there was a crisis, which is Rohingya crisis, which was a crisis for us also. In the onward discussion, maybe we are going to discuss how this has affected us as Bangladesh, how it has affected our growth and our development. And also I can tell my next generation that, okay, I tried from my part, somehow I tried to bring awareness by writing something or joining some webinars. Or also I can say that I tried joining the camps to reduce it, to solve, become a part of the solution. And also maybe in the future, jointly we can work more together, because I am really impressed by the way Creek is working. Of course, it is the support of the government also, that they allow organization like this to work more on it. And I'm really thankful for giving due importance to such a topic like this. I want to stop here, Dr. Ahmed, just to give you an opportunity to moderate the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalwar. It was really interesting to recap the history of the crisis, and our gratitude to you as an author and a historian to present why they are here. And of course, we were very interested to and curiously we heard about your motivation about working into this conflict in some way and contribute towards resolution. Ladies and gentlemen, as promised, let me welcome our co-founder of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Dr. Hilal Mohiuddin, who also teaches at North-South University in Dhaka, Bangladesh, in this dialogue session. Dr. Hilal, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Dilwar. Am I audible? Do you hear me properly?
Yeah, perfectly, perfectly.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure indeed that you are here and you are sharing your insights and experience with us. We desperately needed that, and it would really help us to build a bond with you to work in the future in different areas. It can be on knowing about comparing the situation of Rohingyas in Bangladesh camps and the conditions of Rohingyas in um, other camps that you have observed before. So you have plenty of experiences that we need to cash on at some point, if you agree and if you stay with us. I have gone through the recent because we are working on Rohingya issues for quite some time, and that's why we have been keeping an eye all the time, almost all the time, to the happenings that are taking place all around. Just 2 or 3 days back, international, it's a Human Rights Watch, probably Human Rights Watch, and in many other platforms as well, it is mentioned that because of their plight, in the only in 2, 3, 4 years they have the Rohingyas developed severe mental health problems, many Rohingyas, and they are becoming vulnerable, gradually becoming vulnerable to become mental health patients. I was just reading out that report, and it was really becoming more connectable with our previous assumptions. We are assuming that long time ago, and that we have that reflection as well in the book that the books we published, that this might happen at some point. And now this is the high time when we are seeing all these problems are, you know lurking in front of our eyes. So I was curious when I was listening to you. I was curious to know from you, from your experience from other camps all over the world, whether you have seen any sort of mental health crisis or other problems that are really part of the refugee livelihood. Here, we are not calling them refugee, but the thing is that they're refugee. In fact, they're refugee. We are using different terms, maybe different for there are different diplomatic reasons why we have adopted something different than the common term refugee, and it is creating questions here and there. Anyway, and I am just connecting my question with that too, FDMN, whether calling them refugee will benefit them or just terming them FDMN is really depriving them of some benefits they might get from the world communities. Like, our general understanding is that when we term refugees refugee, they get charity, they get help, they get medical aid, they get loans, they get credits, they get everything, all sort of supports from the world, because we have very established refugee sort of arrangements for different NGOs. Even for NGOs, because of bureaucracy, if one international NGO wants to do something for the Rohingyas, probably they will be asked the question, maybe at theoretical level, that no, look, we don't know who the FDMNs are, and we don't have anything written in our guidelines like FDMN. So the term, what is your take? Do you think the term FDMN instead of refugee is creating some kind of roadblocks in serving them in different ways by the NGOs all over the world? Because we have heard something about people, those who are working there, and from the NGO personnel as well. I spoke to some international, donor organization representatives, or just the employees, those who are working there for international organizations. It is their take that the term FDMN is not really helping us out, because there are different refugee protocols. We can cash them out easily, and refugees can get benefit out of that. But when we call them FDMN, and it is not an established or legitimate refugee term, legitimate term for the displaced people and the stateless people, it really creates some problem down the road, that different organizations have different structures. Those who are quite bureaucratic, it's difficult for them to justify that FDMN means Rohingyas, because there is no such synonyms or lexicons adopted in Rohingya literature, or Rohingya guidelines or Rohingya protocols of different organizations. And so I had mainly two questions. Number one, how many different types of problems you have seen down the road in different refugee camps all over the world when you are working with them? These are the new emerging ones that probably people did not foresee that well, but they eventually became you know uh, problems for the international communities, that these new problems are not well attended. So this is one, and the second one is whether the term FDMN is really creating any sort of obstruction or roadblocks to serve the Rohingyas in the Rohingya camps. Anyway.
Mr. Dalwa, before you respond, let me also
Yep.
compliment Dr. Hilal's question. So, Dr. Hilal was referring forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals, in short, FDMN, and how this technology impacts humanitarian work in terms of many of the aspects, funding and other things. So, we are eager to know your response on this particular topic area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hilal, for asking and the question, or I should say the hard question, because in this humanitarian sector, while working, I have found that asking the genuine question is actually useful. And now I'll start with the last question first. You see, calling them FDMN, forcibly displaced Myanmar national. Uh, Before telling up on these, because Professor Ahmed knows that I have seen this crisis from both sides of the table. As a civil military coordinator, I have seen the crisis putting on a uniform, and then I came outside other side of the table, and now I am seeing. At that time, FDMN was our literature, and now we question the literature. It's absolutely all right. Let us consider that in 2017, once Kofi Annan gave his report on this Rohingya issue, the day the report was published, immediately after that day, there was a flagship operation on. The way Hitler attacked Polish radio station with a disguise of Polish troops, attacked a German radio station, then created the stage to attack Poland. So that is known as, in military terminology, it's known as flagship operation. The same way it happened, once Kofi Annan report was given, the very next day, it was reported that Rohingya people has attacked at least 19 cantonment and police station in Myanmar. 19, maybe. And with that plea, the genocide started. The latest one started. Now, in the Kofi Annan report, nowhere the word Rohingya was used. Does it mean that Rohingyas are not there? It's already there. So these, you have already told Dr. Hilal that this is part of diplomacy and politics. The merits and demerits, we are going to address it. Let us be very, very clear that people are displaced within the country is IDP, internally displaced people, people crossing the border, taking the refuge, not migrate. So they are the refugees. So that is the understanding. Now, when we are working in the camp, the camp is controlled by Triple RC. Triple RC has got camp in charge who all are equivalent to Upajila Nirbhahi officers in Bangladesh. In that ranking, civil servants are there as camp in charge, and they are actually coordinating the humanitarian works and humanitarian workers of various humanitarian organizations. So they are calling these Rohingya people as FDMN, and we are calling them refugee. They have their limitation not to call them a refugee. We have our limitation not to call them anything else than refugee. I was working in Chittagong Hill Tracks, in fact, in 2001, 2, and 3. until that time, I went to visit the house of a tribal king, and I found it is written that tribal king. But recently, we are seeing that they are addressed as indigenous. So now this is also questioned. Bangladesh government don't want to call them indigenous, and they do not want to change their status or status quo from indigenous, which they have adopted recently. Before I can say 10 years or 20 years, I have not seen them. They are calling themselves indigenous. So you see, you are very correct. You are very correct that if you can term or define someone as a refugee, then there are few internationally accepted uh, advantages can be given to them. Now, I hope I have clarified the part of FDMN and refugee issues. We will come to the merits and demerits parts once we discuss or elaborate further. Now we are coming to the first question you asked regarding the problems or the latest of the security situation, overall security situation in Rohingya crisis. So before I narrate that, let us have some ideas shared so that we all are in the same page. Now we got to remember that it is over 5 years Rohingya crisis going on. Now, as per the international norm, the actually it is difficult to call these crises anymore as an emergency response, because emergency response has got definite days to count. After that, the transition starts. So this has again the solution of this crisis is not very clear. So that's why perhaps this emergency is called as protected emergency response. 5 years, we need to remember this thing, not yet solved. Then we have to also understand that Bangladesh is trying to explore all the possibilities to ensure the safe and dignified repatriation. The only stance Bangladesh government has that they have to repatriate to Myanmar. Now, the situation you see, the latest coup happened in February 2021. The repatriation process has totally stopped, talking from the ground. Meanwhile, Gambia has filed a case against Myanmar in the International Court of Justice. And another case is also currently under investigation in the International Criminal Court against the atrocities and the ethnic cleansing happened in Myanmar. So, keeping these realities in mind, the repatriation process is lingered. This is a reality. Also include that more than 20,000 Rohingyas are already shifted from Kutupalong camp to the Bhasanchar. So now you think about the psychological state. I am coming to the point of Professor Hilal, that let me be very simple in expressing how a Rohingya is feeling in this scenario, in this reality. Once I look towards the eyes of the Rohingya juveniles, I should say, boy or girl, I really feel pensive. There is no hope, no education, no future in their eyes. They are seeing a very congested camp, the biggest or the largest refugee camp, the people of largest refugee camp. Some of them have got birth in Bangladesh. They do not know whether their citizenship will be, they will be claimed as Bangladeshi or they will be claimed as a Myanmar national. Bangladesh is not a Middle East country that they do not grant citizenship to others. We have our laws, but who will fight for them? Think about the young girl who falls in love with a NGO worker, a Bangladeshi NGO worker, but no hope, no licit possibility ahead. Amid this crisis, now how a camp is running, we all know. In a camp, they have basic need. Number one is food. Food is covered by the WFP initiative. the overall accommodation and all other thing. UNHCR is taking care of that. UNICEF is taking care of the education and child protection and violence. You see, we are talking about the gender-based violence inside the camp, whereas they have faced the brutal violence history can ever see in their own land. So now you try to think, or let us try to understand the psyche they are having. And now you are telling after 5 years that there is no hope of going back. And again, you are telling that they have to relocate from this camp to again another camp, which is a new island. In the island, you are telling them to go there and stay there. Sometimes, Dr. Hilal, uh, I think that it is actually a global irony. Once Iraq attacked Kuwait and captured, global community said, okay, let us go to Saudi Arabia, create a coalition force, attack Iraq, rapture Iraq, and save Kuwait. Once Russia attacked Ukraine, this time they said, okay, let us don't go there, but let us send arsenal to Ukraine, let them call freedom fighters, train them, and let the fight go on. And again, once Rohingyas are in the same problem, they are brutally shunned out of all facilities and they are compelled to take refuge in Bangladesh. Here again, we are giving another prescription that, okay, give them some refugee status, give them some humanitarian help, and contain them. So you see the similar problem but different prescription here. Now you tell me, we are having only 1,400 US dollar around per capita income or our GDP, and Turkey has got more than 11,000 per capita. 1,400 and 11,000. Our refugee in Bangladesh gets per head $14, and refugee in Turkey gets 600 plus. You see the disparity. Even in the humanitarian aid we are giving, are we transparent in this area? Now, Desmond Tutu said, every time we are helping people, drowning people, and we are helping them, bringing them out of the water. But sometimes we have to go to upstream and see why people are falling in the water. So that is the thing. Everyone knows the solution is not in Bangladesh. The solution actually is in Myanmar. The same size or bigger than this refugee camp or the camp settlement may be created in Myanmar, in Arakan. It was a independent state. We have the precedence of East Timor and South Sudan, where international community has moved positively, created conducive environment where they have compelled the host nation that you cannot do that. You cannot just clean entire clan. Same is happening in Darfur. You see, means home, and Fur means the Fur-speaking people. So that is the area Darfur. These people are actually from Central African Republic. They were compelled to migrate to this area in Sudan. But then what is happening in that refugee camp? The similar story. They call it the longest or the biggest humanitarian crisis, refugee crisis. But we have to accept that one of every 7 refugees in the world is now a Rohingya refugee. We have to create a situation. We need blue helmets or the even peacekeepers in other side of the border. Bangladesh is facing a lot of problem. Now you see what in the camp what is happening. One is that they do not have any hope to go back. Another one is that government is also telling that they need to relocate to Bhasanchar. Not recently, once there was only 2 camps, Onayapara camp in Kutupalong, the registered camp. You know, out of 34 camps, 2 camps are registered camps because those are staying there since 1991. So there was a sort of I should say, referendum taken, that are they willing to go back? Only 30% said that they are willing to go back to Myanmar. So situation is so bad. Junta government is there, and even you see the Myanmar, um, you see their overall the design of their legislature. 25% of the seats are mandatory for uniformed person, military people. So it's very difficult. Now, international community, apart from giving humanitarian aid, we need strategic maneuver to address these issues, because if the scenario is not conducive for the Rohingyas to go back, they are not going to accept the offer to repatriate. Now, these people in the camp, they are becoming more vulnerable and frustrated. They are engaged in illegal activities. Recently, we have seen their leader, Mohibullah, was brutally killed inside the camp. Now, government may say that there is no weapon inside the camp, but then we all understand how inside the camp, Rohingya leader is killed by a lethal weapon if there is no weapon inside. So these are the realities there. And you see, drug. Yaba is a drug we at least know. Maybe someone from outside will not understand, but Yaba is a deadly drug, and wherever there is a drug, there is money, there is women, and there is crime. So what is happening there? You see, inside the camp, to my understanding, the humanitarian workers, they work up to the last light every day. Have you ever gone to a refugee camp during dark? We had the opportunity sometime once we were in uniform at that time, because we were responsible for the overall security of the camp. The Rohingya camps during daylight and doing Rohingya camps at night is totally different. You see, they are becoming the peddlers, the carriers of Yaba. I am staying there for over 1 year in Cox's Bazar now. The local community, the local young people, this much of drug addiction and I should say prostitution, I have not. It was not reported earlier like that. So people should understand that once there is drug, there is crime, and there is some other, I should say, transitional crimes happening there. So eventually gang culture will come up. I'm not surprised, because it's on in the news that a gang of Rohingya attacked a Ansar camp, killed the camp commander, and looted the weapon. It's happening there. So in this scenario, actually, I think now, if you are asking the psychological state of the Rohingya refugees, I should say we have a lot to work there. In fact, we have a lot to work in specific areas. I'd request Professor Ahmed and Professor Hilal to take note of it. Number one is that we need to preserve the evidences still available there, because day and night, this Myanmar military government is trying to destroy the evidences of the atrocity they did. So we have, like I wrote a book. In my book, I have given the deadlines, the dates, and the incidents I have kept there. Now, if you see the Myanmar literature in online, you will find that, okay, it's a very nice place to visit perhaps. But what they did to this ethnic cleansing and modern genocide, this record is not readily available there, because it's possible to temper the data we see in online. So it is happening there. So before that, we need to work to preserve the evidences so that in future, no one dares to do the same thing. People say that Myanmar case has inspired Putin to attack on Ukraine. Who can say? Who can say? But it's true that international community has that moved very positively or very hopefully, which encourages the common public or international public to believe that, okay, next day another country is not going to attack another country. So this is one area where actually we need to work. Another area is that repatriation process. Will they be ever going back to Arakan or in Myanmar? We need to work on that. We need to actively work on that. We need to give hope to these people. Only then, perhaps, we are going to address their psychological issue. Without giving any hope, without giving any chance to go back. Now, if you ask what is your mental condition, whatever mental therapy or psychological support you want to give, perhaps it will not work. Even a soldier in a battlefield, after coming from there, they some of them suffer from PTSD. Now they're staying in the trenches day after day, and they know that this battle is not going to be over very soon. And so same is believed by the locals. So initially there was a sympathy that, okay, you are a refugee, you came here without anything, now you take shelter here. But now you see the demographic challenge here. Initially, the locals were 5 lakhs, they were coming, and now they are 1.2 million, and locals are only 0.5. The demography has already changed, and it is a threat. Some of the people says that if there is a government change, in regime change in Bangladesh, maybe the camp scenario and the process had some adverse effect. We may discuss on these even in a separate discussion. Now, in this scenario, I think the main problem is going to happen, which the topic we had today, how Ukraine crisis is actually going to affect this crisis. Ukraine crisis is going to affect. Now, let me have a small brush up for 1 minute or 2 minutes on Ukraine crisis. So, interestingly, it was India who captured Hyderabad. Nizam was an independent country. It was India captured Hyderabad and took under his map. That was the last precedence happened in the human history. An independent country is capturing another independent country. Iraq tried Kuwait but failed. And now you see Russia is another country which is trying to capture. Already the Crimea is taken. Belarus is already created. Mariupol is already taken. So the design is moving on. People are asking that why they are not taking Kiev. Maybe Putin doesn't have any intention for Kiev, because military point of view, we say something positional advantage. Once you know that it is eventually going to fall, you need not to use your force there, because that actually I think Professor Ahmed knows better than me, because a good military leader do not misuse a single bullet. So you see, it is happening there. Now, this Russian aggression against Ukraine actually triggered a new refugee crisis already in the Polish border, in Moldovan border, in Romanian border. As per the today's count, so far I know that almost 12 million is internally displaced, and out of that 5 million is already a refugee. Now, up to yesterday, we were telling that Bangladesh, Kutupalong, Bangladesh is the largest refugee camp, but now I think the status is going to change. Maybe the largest refugee camp will be now in Poland or in Romania. So now, most dangerous thing is that another over 7 million Ukrainians are trapped inside the country right now. The moment Russia is going to allow more humanitarian operation to occur inside the occupied territory, the number of refugees are going to increase, I can tell you. So these are the increasing numbers. Now, I just want to go to the, I should say, I'm trying to correlating now how Ukraine crisis is going to create impact. The problems I have already covered. These are already accepted problems. But now I'll try to relate how this crisis is going to worsen the situation. Now, first of all, Ukraine crisis definitely is going to require new funds and support from the international community. already almost all the frontline INGO and UN, they are responding. They are maneuvering their force, their humanitarian force across the Ukraine border. So they need fund. It's a very emergency response in the European soil. So they will need larger fund there. Now, funds are limited. The resources, humanitarian resources are limited globally. So from that limited resource, once new funds are created for Ukraine, so eventually it's understood the funds for Rohingya crisis is declining. And what happened, once the fund is declining, the budget is short, then actually we do not get, first of all, we are challenged to address the basic needs of the refugees there. Number one. Number two, humanitarian responders are also expensive. I mean, good humanitarian responders. So two things are working here. One is fresh crisis is there, the best humanitarian responding brains you need there, and also uh, the once fund is reduced, the salary is reduced. So you see the most of the humanitarian organizations are now struggling. They are reducing the number of humanitarian aid workers they had. The quality and humanitarian experienced humanitarian workers, they are now moving to maybe Ukraine crisis. So here a vacuum will eventually create. I have seen it is already created there. It is already created there. So what is happening, that the quality of service humanitarian workers are delivering in the refugee camps, that is falling. That will fall. Eventually that will fall. And we need funding to ensure food security for the refugees, because they do not have any livelihood option. WFP or world community have to ensure their food there. Their accommodation, government says that there will not be any permanent accommodations. So the accommodations are created there are all in temporary in nature, and it needs to be turned over after a certain period of time. Education is already denied because government thinks that what they will do after getting Bangladeshi education, eventually they are going to go back to Myanmar. Myanmar doesn't care. So actually these people are not getting educated, and so unfortunate. You have cased people not giving education. Uh, we know that are they going to be the best kind of a human being we are trying every minute. Today we three are discussing here. We do not have our personal benefit here. We are crying for them, but what will happen to them? Their capacity is not increased. Can they have you ever thought that maybe their food distribution can be controlled by them? Let us train them. We don't take this risk. Maybe we think that, okay, if they start doing things, then what the humanitarian agencies will do. However, that is a different discussion. But we need fund even for the cases we had in the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court. The court cases will not move without fund. So we will need that. So as I said already, that Bangladesh foreign minister has already requested Canadian government to help Gambia to run the case in the International Court of Justice. So in this scenario, the main threat immediately is that the fund crisis, and we also need public opinion. If you feel for the Ukraine refugees that they need to be saved, we also need to believe that Myanmar refugees also have the same right, same human right should be applicable for them. So these people, at least Ukraine people, they have got an option to fight. Countries like USA is sending MLRS artillery pieces in support of them. These Rohingya people, they also want to fight. They have ARSA, but no one is actually helping them. Maybe this is not the problem of global community. This is a problem at our end. We could not sensitize. We could not let them know. The media coverage we did not get. We did not. We were not able to make aware of a citizen sitting in the in USA or Canada who is a policymaker or at least has a capacity to donate. We could not sensitize them. Like that's why I say that organization like Creek is useful. They did not bother to find me. I am a humble worker in the camps. They found me, and they allowed me to ventilate my understanding. Maybe I don't understand the entire gamut of the game. Maybe I don't understand the global perspective that well. The people are sitting in New York or Geneva or in Vienna taking decisions for the refugees. But I understand this much, that this is a brutal genocide occurred, and ethnic cleansing, which is recognized by United Nations that it has happened there. So I just understand that we need to collect the evidences, save the evidences, and we need to sensitize. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's a wonderful discussion, and we can go on possibly another hour. But traditionally, we keep our webinar just because of the audience an hour. So we are just at the last end of our discussion today. And I mean, of course, before I formally conclude, let me summarize some of the points Mr. Delaware has brought forward in response to Dr. Hilal's question. And this is very interesting to see how the policy at the international community, including Canada, the country we both live, Dr. Hilal and I here, are responding to the various needs when there are competition with regards to conflicts. Ukraine crisis is dominating everywhere at this point in time, and of course, it eclipses the Rohingya crisis in terms of a response, as Mr. Dilla rightly mentioned. Fund will be drained out, and also the sensitization of the Rohingya crisis in the international media is not there. And on that point, I'm also, let me explain our frustration here in Canada, that Rohingya crisis has actually not in the headlines of Canadian broadcast, electronic and print media for years. Although, as a government, Canada has contributed in this conflict with lots of fund, I would say, since 2017. And just when we were discussing, I also displayed the current commitment of the Canadian government for another 3 to 5 years. So these are there, but interestingly, as Mr. Delaware rightly mentioned, that Creek possibly is the only organization in North America which exclusively researches on conflict, Rohingya crisis, and its resolution at various levels. And also reflecting from our latest work, which has just come out, and I've also shown it in the Amazon website. Dear audience, if you're interested to get more perspectives, please do buy a copy of our book, because the proceeds goes to the education of Rohingyas in the camps, as you understand. So what I was trying to explain further, that in the book, Dr. Hilal extensively wrote about the crisis on livelihood and how this should be really taken into the next level. I have written a couple of chapters on security. As Mr. Delwa rightly mentioned, the demography has changed, and also the security component has been mentioned by the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh in UN General Assembly several times. And we have also looked into that, what does security means in terms of Rohingya crisis in the future that we are so much gotten into. And also I've written a chapter on social stigma with regards to COVID-19. And this connects to Dr. Hilal's question that the psychological trauma of displaced people need to be understood and realized in whatever delivery you are going to make in terms of education, in terms of wash and other things. And on a final point, today we were getting insights from Mr. Delwar, who worked, as he rightly mentioned in his opening remarks, that he sat in both the sides of the table as a uniformed person and then a humanitarian worker, and he has heard the discussion on both the sides, how the policy is being implemented with regards to managing such a huge population. And to the best of my knowledge, I think Bangladesh is the only case in the world, I believe. I mean, if somebody can dispute, I'll be more than happy to engage further. But to the best of my knowledge, what I'd like to put forward is that the management of Rohingyas through Triple RC, Refugee Rehabilitation and Repatriation Commission, is a unique case. And as Mr. Delwa rightly mentioned, 34 camps are being managed by civil service officers, and of course from the various sides. I think this is one of the cases where we can say that Bangladesh is doing its best as a host country. And going back to the question of identity, FDMN versus refugee, I would also like to share with the audience, and which I also showed a little bit from the screen before in the show, that Bangladesh is not a signatory of 1951 Refugee Convention and 67 Rome Statute, but Bangladesh is hosting one of the largest displaced people on earth, and it also respects fully to international protection regime. And I think another example is Indonesia, which also is not a signatory, but does support international protection regime and providing all supports to the refugees, and especially avoiding refoulement, which is very important in terms of refugee protection. So on that note, I would like to conclude today by saying that refugee crisis is possibly going to stay with us for decades. And both on the perspective of Mr. Delwar and myself working as UN peacekeepers, we have seen directly other conflicts as well. And we have interacted with displaced people. And we just, on a personal note, reflecting from our memories, I can say that during my visit to Tindouf camps in Algeria with regards to Sahrawi displaced people from Western Sahara, one thing always is critically missing is the hope of repatriation or going back to the homeland. Although Mr. Delwar has mentioned that there are surveys, less number of people are interested to go back to Rakhine, but in 2019 field trip, I did encounter a lot of people, especially elderly, those who are desperately trying to go back to their villages and places they were displaced from. And I do still remember speaking with an elder who was also teaching, and he said that I'm not interested to go to Bhashanchor, because that was the question I was trying to get a pulse from. And he said, the reason is, here I can stand and I can look at the other side of the Naf River, and I can at least imagine that there was my home, and I can at least go in the near future within a short crossing the short distance of Naf River. This is a psychological a condition that he mentioned and he shared with us. So within this whole ideas of repatriation, I think Mr. Delwar is very right in mentioning that we have a lot to work, especially the repatriation of Rohingyas fully, which is consistent with the Bangladesh government's policy. And we look forward to cooperation and collaboration. And scholar like Mr. Delwar, we invite his work, and we'll be more than happy to cooperate and collaborate with Mr. Delwar in his future endeavors if he likes to do. And on a final note, let me also reiterate that Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada has very recently commissioned a small project, a pilot project actually, to collect and preserve evidence, genocide evidence, as Mr. Delwar was inferring in his comments. And we are going to publish and write and seek funding for this prevention project, which was actually the concept note was prepared by one of our practicum students and research associates. So we are working on that. And also Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is actively involved in education of adolescent females in the camps. Dr. Hilal Muhyiddin is our project director of the current project funded by a Rotary Global Grant. And if you are interested, please visit our website and do contribute to the education activities and projects that Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada undertakes in the future. And this is all I had to add as a moderator at the end of the session. And before we conclude, let me welcome once again Mr. Delwa to have his final words. Very briefly, sir, if you mention what do you think in terms of future of the crisis itself, and then we'll formally conclude. Go ahead, Mr. Delwa.
Thank you very much, sir. And I just want to conclude that Bangladesh is managing this crisis, unwanted crisis, of course, because of the experience we gathered in last 35 years during UN missions across the globe. People, even the triple RC, they also accept this thing because the confidence we give, because we have seen things how it happens, and we have ensured. You served in Western Sahara. I served in South Sudan. I have seen the birth of South Sudan, and then again I have served again also there. So this experience should be harnessed together and husbanded, and then perhaps we are going to address this issue. You have correctly said that the Rohingya camp in Bangladesh is one of the most well managed camp, because the prime responsibility, as per the book, goes that it's the responsibility of the host nation. So as a host nation, Bangladesh is trying its best with limited capacity, with limited fund. They are trying their best. Now we need to help them. Now you have different capacities, you have developed your capacities, so let us jointly help our country to come out of this crisis and take lesson of this crisis. And perhaps we can also help the crisis happening in Ukraine or some other part uh, of the world from our experience. Let us learn from there. Finally, I'll say one word is that people are people, human beings, irrespective of their location, color, race, language. We need to respect human before we talk about human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Delwar. Dr. Hilal, if you have last comments and before we conclude, please go ahead, sir. Uh, Unmute, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Delwar. I think we have covered a lot of issues that we have been experiencing over the years, over the last 2, 3 years. So everything is captured almost because we are having these experiences almost every day. We have different projects and we are working for others too. So one important thing that you brought out here is probably we need to define that at this stage, because this we are trying our best. But the thing is that probably the narrative of this the term we need to be transformed in a way that we can really create a meaningful diplomacy. That's the most important thing, to my understanding, that we need that. Otherwise, it would be band-aid solutions. We are already doing it, and we are feeding them, we are keeping them, we are thinking about them, we are launching different types of projects, education projects, their health, adolescent health, reproductive health, then pure sanitation, drinking water, and all other things. So we are there. All the humanitarian activities and humanitarian things are taken care of, well taken care of. And Bangladesh is showing tremendous expertise, I would say. They're one of the best managed, and one of the most well managed refugee scenario in Bangladesh. So we can't just blame them. But one thing that is missing, to my understanding, as you said, that funding will be reduced, but we have to take that into consideration. And probably we need to say that not we, now you. I am really focused about you, especially the diplomatic missions. Our diplomatic missions need to be specially revamped. We, the Greek people, you people, and other people can help them. So if the diplomatic mission is thinking something or creating a new cell just to create global opinion, at least we can create something in global media. That why not in CNN, BBC, Wall Street journals, and others in Canadian newspapers? We are a small organization. Creek is a very small organization. We can't really penetrate to that level. So there are other people who can. It needs funding. It needs money. It doesn't just go by the words of some people like us. We have good hearts. That's fine. But hearts don't really do all the jobs all the time. Money is the most important thing. So not only Bangladesh government, probably We have to convince the Bangladesh government that create a special cell about a meaningful diplomacy for the world, and then generate funding from different sources, because global communities have the responsibility too. China, India, Russia, we know them, what they're doing. Singapore, these countries have economic interests. Since you have economic interests, you cannot just give up all the humanitarian mandates that you have. You have other convictions too. You have to maintain that too quite well. You can't just give up one for the uh, you know for the benefit of the other one. I mean economic interest. So we can bring resources from them. We can, I think it is possible if we have a special diplomatic wing about Rohingya. It's probably a timely need at this moment. Bangladesh might consider about doing that. So not we, I am really ready at this stage just to transfer the terminology we to you. Now it's in the government's plate. They can do it. They can mobilize money global. They can convince the global communities that you are doing a lot of things for Ukrainian people. We are supporting that, and we don't have any disagreement about that it's a global need. But this one should not be sidelined. This one should not be overlooked at the end of the day, because these people need to go back. And if we need to do that, we have to convince the global community that you are having benefit from Myanmar, but not, we are accepting that you can have that economic diplomacy. That's fine, but not at the cost of human rights, compromise of the human rights of these people, especially destitute people, those who don't have big mouths, big faces, big people. They don't have oil and other things, so they don't have the big brothers to talk for them, to speak for them. They don't have any other big brothers to speak for them. So probably we can start from that point, because we have written two books, and we have given some geopolitical indications too. Now it's to those people, their goodwill. If they really want to make a change, relocation, doing this and that, taking different types of, or managing it well, the camps, is that because it is creating hope, rather creating hope of the Rohingya people that we are doing fine here. We are living fine. We are getting all the benefits here. So why should we leave? Rather, it would be better for us to become accommodated, assimilated inside the society and getting part of that. So they are more, many of them are getting that dream in their perspective these days. That is going to be another big problem, because local people are already minority. These people have become minority, and there is a conflict, tension of unseen future, what is gonna happen really. So all these things should be taken care of, and taking into consideration these realities, probably we can now create some sort of advocacy. I would say Greek will start their advocacy at some point. We have something about genocide, and Canadian Museum of Human Rights is there to help us out. We'll be taking that platform as an advantage, and we'll be trying to convince the people that are coming from the government here, especially diplomatic people, that create a special wing, and we will try our best to help you out. And Dr. Delwarkhan, once again, we are thanking you, and we will be expecting you to in this mission. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hilal, for your kind words. And I think is very interesting. Dr. Hilal has really mentioned about macro level initiatives like diplomacy, and it's very important that it should go on as strong as possible, because we have our Bangladesh representative in the UN, Rabab Fatima, elected as in one of the very important chairs within the United Nations. And I think Bangladesh would take it to consideration that diplomacy must continue to negotiate the repatriation of Rohingyas back to Rakhine State. Ladies and gentlemen, as we promised, we would end our session with a optimistic note by saying that Crete is working in this conflict, on this conflict for almost 5 years now. And we have a very limited role in terms of advocacy and policy suggestion, as Dr. Hilal rightly mentioned. I also mentioned as a Canadian living here that is very unfortunate. This crisis has not really been into the focus of mainstream media. and there's no mention of it actually in any of these discussions, and this really is not understood in the spirit of Ukraine war when we see the international support, as Mr. Dello rightly mentioned. So we just want to finish today's session by saying that let's talk about Rohingyas, keep this discussion alive from our perspectives with whatever capacities we have, because Rohingyas are one of the very unfortunate group of ethnocultural people that they do not have voices like many other displaced people have. Historically, as you have heard from Mr. Deloitte, they were deprived of education, and they were deprived of their citizenship, all these civic facilities and amenities since 1982. So this is why Creek feels obligated to talk about policies and suggestions for the conflict resolution. So thank you so much, Mr. Delor, once again for your insights. And as I always love to hear from you in the future, please do connect with us, and we can work together, and we can build upon your knowledge and share with the international community about the conflict. The audience, stay well and stay fine. Conflict is inevitable in human history, but it is also inevitable that human have developed innovative solutions for conflict resolution. Otherwise, we would have not been here in 2022 as one of the leading species in the world, according to my favorite historian, Noah Yuval Hariri, who said that cooperation is the key of human civilization and progress. And I strongly believe that as we evolved as Homo sapiens, we have actually understood this cooperation thing in so many ways that we have progressed the civilization at this stage. And if we believe in cooperation, we will talk about Rohingyas. We will do things so that they can go back with dignity and security back to their homeland. With this one, let's conclude. Those who have joined us from Canada, good night. And those who have joined from Bangladesh, stay well. And we wish best rest of your day's activities. And good night from Canada and from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute. Bye-bye.